Okay, well, it looks like it is 12 o'clock, so we will go ahead and get started. I do want to just give a disclaimer. I have a hard stop at 1 o'clock today for another meeting, so we might end a little bit early if we're not done sooner than that. So I don't have a ton of things for the agenda today, but we will take the time to answer any questions you have as well. So welcome to our CEO office hour call today for June 10th, or geez, July 10th. Time is flying even though we're still stuck at home. So hopefully you can all see my screen. And I'm just going to go through our beginner slides as usual. Try to keep your phones muted. If you have any questions, you can unmute yourself at any time or type them into the chat window. And I don't have the chat window pulled up, so Linda or Lori, if you could watch that for me, that would be great. Just a reminder of why we're all here, to kind of provide some additional technical assistance and training opportunities, and also allow you all to interact with each other and ask any questions that you might have. Today I have a couple specific topics to go over, and then a couple of questions that have come in to provide answers to everybody, and then again just give you the opportunity to ask any other questions that you might have. So as a quick reminder, as always, our timeline for the key tasks that you all have been working on for the past several months. The deadline is set to September 1st. At this point, I don't see that we will be pushing that back at all, because we do have some pretty major things that have to happen after we get to the September 1st deadline before January 1st. And I think that most of you are well on your way to achieving these tasks and goals, so that's great. And then we'll be able to move on to the next sort of key tasks that will be heavily on the workforce development boards. So just make sure that you're communicating with myself, Linda, or Mike if you are struggling with any of these things, or if there's any way that we can assist you in achieving these targets going forward. So that brings us to really the first topic that I wanted to talk to you about, which is in relation really to those key tasks. So the next big tasks are making sure that you have a fiscal agent in place, and making sure that your local workforce development board has been seated according to WIOA and has a compliant membership. And so with those things both being in place by September 1st, that's going to allow us to continue down our path of training and technical assistance to really get you all up and functioning in a WIOA compliant way. So the first piece for upcoming training, which all of the trainings right now will be scheduled virtually. We're still under quite a few travel restrictions related to the pandemic, so it's just easier to plan for virtual trainings at this point in time. So fiscal agent training, a few of you have already had your fiscal agents attend the training over the past few weeks. And so the next set of fiscal agent training we do have on the books with Mayor. It will be Wednesday, September 16th, and it'll last from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. with a 30-minute lunch break sort of in the middle of the day there. So as you have identified your fiscal agents, make sure that you're passing that information on to me so that I can gather some information from them. I'll need to get some information from them so that we can get them set up in our system, and then also get them scheduled to attend this training. And as well, just as a reminder, the fiscal agents that have already attended training will be able to join this one again, because we are working to refine it and add additional information to the training as well. So you won't be left out in the cold, I promise. And we'll continue to work with those existing fiscal agents over the next few months as well. So that's a definite on the date. I mean, I suppose it could change, but for now, this is when it will be penciled in. As CEOs, you might want to attend that training, but it's definitely not a requirement. And trust me, as a non-fiscal person, this is definitely fiscal agent training. So you might find it useful, you might not, but it will be designed for the fiscal folks. And then the second piece, once those local boards are in place, as a reminder, we went over during the last office hours calls the requirements again, and that one of those requirements is that Iowa Workforce Development certifies the local board and ensures that it meets all of the membership requirements and everything. So we want to get that in place by September 1st so that we can get training with mayor and mayor scheduled for those local boards. And if you all remember back to last fall when we came and did our cross-state tour with mayor and mayor for CEO training, the local board training will be very similar. So each local board is going to have their own training. which will really allow them the opportunity to go through the training together and work together and ask questions and things like that. So I think it'll be really good. We will really focus on what their roles and responsibilities are as a local board and what some of the next steps are. So what I would envision after we complete local board training is something very similar to what you all have been working on, sort of this key task list that you've had for the past several months. The local board is going to come in and they're going to have some key tasks as well. Hopefully, you will also be able to get some staff to the board hired to help them, because if we remember correctly, the law is pretty clear that whatever responsibilities the staff to the board does not complete, the local board itself has to complete. So, you know, the fiscal agent can't do it, the service provider can't do it, you all can't do it. The local board is responsible under the law for those things. So the training will focus on all of those, and we'll come out of those trainings with some key tasks for the local board members to start working on. Again, this meeting will be designed for the local workforce development board members and their staff only. There won't be a need for fiscal agent or CEOs to attend. But just so you all are aware, we are aiming to schedule 9 4-hour training sessions, again, very similar to the fiscal agent, where it'll be from 10 to noon or 10 to 2 with a 30-minute lunch, each board getting their own sort of day of the week for 9 times that everybody gets trained. And so that is sort of our goal along those lines. And then one other thing that I wanted to mention in relation to training that's not on the slide, we are also still very much in amidst of working on the fiscal agent training and all of that, working on several documents regarding budgeting that you all as CEOs and local boards might find useful as you continue to work through these processes and become WIOA compliant. And the interesting thing is every time we sort of work on a new budgeting form, it very clearly becomes related to something else. So, you know, it kind of all starts with your budget at a high level for the area, and then how that's put into the RFP, and how that then transfers to what the fiscal agents or what the service providers will report to the fiscal agents, and the fiscal agents are required to track and report. And so all of these things are very, very much linked together. So we're working to make sure that you all have a clear roadmap for how these budget documents will function together and assist you in administering these programs in your local area. So that's my update on training. Does anybody have any questions or comments or concerns about that before we move on? Doesn't sound like it. And this was more of just a heads up so that we're all on the same page. So that's great. So obviously, if you think of anything at a later date, just let me know, and we will make sure to get those questions answered. Also, if you have any thoughts about what you think needs to be included, we always appreciate that feedback and make sure that you're getting what you need from us. So, oh, the next thing that we're going to talk about, which I didn't put a slide in here for, is, I'm sorry, my phone's ringing. Let me hang that up. Is the financial information that was sent to all of the local areas yesterday. So hopefully you've all had a chance to see those emails. I sent them yesterday morning, but each individual local area got their own email, which included several documents. One of them was just the overall statewide Title I budget information, so you can see the full picture of the funding for the state. The second one was a little bit of a pared down version of the document that we went over when we talked through budgeting for PY20 a few weeks ago as each local area. So it shows just together what your local area's budget for Title I adult DW and youth are, and then what the 10% of that would be and the 90% of that would be. And then also a letter of intent to award funds. And so I just wanted to make sure that if you guys had any questions about that, I gave you a chance to answer. I know that the letter of intent to award funds is a little bit confusing, but realistically, we are not legally allowed to pass down funds that we don't have, and we don't have them yet. So I have been in constant communication with DOL to find out when we will get that funding, because obviously as we work through a transition period like this, it's imperative for us to have those funds, and they have told me that we should be getting it within the next week or so. They mentioned within the first couple of weeks of July. So I am hopeful that that will happen. If not, in the meantime, there are the carryover funds that are available as well. So we're not completely out of sorts for money there, but you know, I am on top of that for you all. So any questions related to any of those budget documents or how the funding is going to be flowing down to your local areas? Okay. Well, we might be done in record time today. So additionally, we have gotten a couple of questions that I just wanted to go over with the group. One of them related to insurance. So what's on this screen is some example language that was in the CEO shared liability agreement or the 2080 agreement, for example, that several of the local areas have been using. And the wording is in relation to the purchase of insurance for the CEOs and the local boards. And so the answer that's on this screen, which, and for those of you that are not on the phone, the question revolves around, is it an allowable cost to use the WIOA administrative funds to pay for liability coverage? And so the answer, which is a direct quote from the Department of Labor, says that WIOA can pay for quote unquote directors and officers liability coverage that will cover a variety of issues, lawsuits, etc. However, most policies do not cover them if they are found to intentionally violate the rules. But it is an allowable cost, but should be allocated amongst all funding sources. And I was actually on the phone earlier with Lori Collins from Mayor, and she has, I think, a good example for how to sort of explain this, because I think that the root that we're trying to get to is this notion of the disallowed costs and what can be covered through insurance and what can't. Lori, do you want to kind of add to that answer based on what we talked about here?
Sure. So all of you all understand that as elected officials, you all have overall liability for the funds. And again, that liability for the funds kicks in should there be a determination that funds need to be paid back. Now, unfortunately, that does happen. It happens in a variety of places. And I know those of you all who may have been around for a while know that Iowa had its own situation a few years ago where this sort of thing happened. The answer that Michelle got from the Department of Labor, I'm fully in support of that answer. I think, though, a lot of you all have asked the question about liability insurance, trying to get away from the idea that your local governments could ultimately, should there be an issue of disallowed cost, could try to get your local governments away from having to cover that cost. And I get that and understand why that would be an issue and be something that you want clarity on. You know, unfortunately, when a situation gets to the point that it has been determined as a disallowed cost, you know, that's no small endeavor that has resulted in that determination. And it's been analyzed and it's been reviewed and probably by a number of people and a number of entities to result at, you know, this is a disallowed cost. If it were, in most of the situations, I can say very comfortably, in the situations where I know around the country where there has been a disallowed cost that has resulted in repayment either to the state or perhaps Department of Labor, just depending upon the timing of everything, those are almost always a result of funds mismanagement with situations like fraud. You know, there's some level of intentional practice that's happening that results in that. You know, I'm not going to speak in absolutes and say, you know, all the time, if it's disallowed costs, then it's a result of criminal activity. That's not the case. But in this situation, if it was just a reporting error, then that's going to get corrected, and that's not going to, you know, result in a disallowed cost. To really get there, it's been the result of it being unresolved over a period of time. And so with that, even if you all do get this insurance that you're allowed to have, sort of like errors and omissions insurance or those sorts of things, while it's allowable and you can pay for it, and you would pay for it out of admin costs, just so you know, because those dollars are split between admin and program, chances are it's not going to cover the situation that most often results in a disallowed cost and a repayment back to IWD or the federal government. So it's a good practice. Feel free to do it and pursue getting that insurance, but just know that in those situations, it's almost always a situation where that insurance is just not going to be able to kick in and cover that. So I'm sure there's questions. So I'm happy to answer any questions you may have or clarify anything that I just said. No?
Lori?
Yep.
The question I have is, it is allowable that
Mm-hmm.
we can get this insurance, and the administration cost, we can take it out of there.
Yes.
But you think, as in the past,
Mm-hmm.
the problems that we have had probably would not, that insurance probably would not have covered those costs.
Yes. In my experience, not just in Iowa, but just in the knowledge that I've had over the years of situations that have resulted in a disallowed cost and a repayment, quite often, that insurance is of no use in those situations.
So,
because it's a direct result of a violation of rules. You know, the insurance just doesn't cover that.
okay, so in your opinion,
Mm-hmm.
we would probably be as well off, if not better off, to structure some very rigorous bylaws in our regions or areas.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Okay, as far as payment, conduct of the administration, conduct of the boards, allowable expenses, do we need to spell it out tight? So
that's a good question. And so my recommendation would be, if there's a comfort level that comes with pursuing the insurance, because, you know, the insurance is not bad. There are times when that insurance is, you know, covers things, covers decisions that the board makes, that whatever. So if there's a comfort level that comes with it, but I think there just has to be an understanding of what it could potentially cover. So that being said, I do think that you all have to ensure that through any RFP or procurement process that you use, that expectations and requirements are clearly spelled out. I think that in any contract that is executed using WIOA Title I funds, that evaluation metrics for performance, performance metrics are clearly spelled out, and expectations around behavior and decision making are clearly spelled out, and they are robust in there. When you all have a contract to a service provider, even if it's a service provider that's been doing this for 40 years, you need to have in there clear language around their responsibility for decisions that they make around those funds. And your first line of defense with a contract is if there's a situation that results in a need of repayment as a result of a decision that that service provider made, that service provider is liable for those funds. It's like you all as elected officials are the final line of defense, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And they're responsible. So yes, all of that you suggested, absolutely.
Okay.
Do all of those things.
Thank
Hi,
you very much.
this is Heather Garcia, and I've spent a little bit of time researching the CTEC situation and being educated by various county supervisors about their experience with CTEC, and I know that they have a strong opinion about insurance and how one county's lack of insurance might have influenced how much they did end up repaying 10 years ago when that settlement was determined. I do believe that WIOA has a lot of safeguards built into it that would prevent something like CTEC from happening again. As examples, having a separate fiscal agent, having the Title I providers not running the board services. We've got a lot of elements in place, and I think you're spot on in saying that having really tight bylaws is going to be helpful, but I think all of us can say hindsight's always 20/20. There's probably going to be something that sneaks up later, but there are a lot of good things that have been built into WIOA and Iowa's state policy that will help prevent some of those bad things from happening again in the future.
Thanks for that, Heather. And I'm a little familiar with CTEC, so, but not. I mean, you're going to be way more familiar with it than me. But so my response wasn't just about that, but obviously, that's been one of those situations. So yeah, and I agree. There's a lot of stuff built into WIOA that is a direct result of things like this happening. It unfortunately it does happen from time to time. So
Thanks for adding all that, both Lori and Heather. And I would agree. I mean, always all along has been that the CEOs are really that last level of payment, right? But you have the ability through the contracts, through the bylaws, through local area policies that will be developed to make sure that there are stopgaps before you having to pay it back, that those people that made the decisions pay it back first. So, but definitely does not hinder you from purchasing this coverage if you want to, and paying for the correct portion of it out of the Title I funds. So, and I will email this out also to everybody so that you have the answer in an email, not just in the PowerPoint. So. The next question that I wanted to just cover is about hiring staff to the board. And I know that a lot of you are in the process of doing this right now, and we already have some staff to the board, which is great. But so I just want to be very clear, and we are in a little bit of a transition, so there's going to be some overlap. But the law is very clear that it is the local workforce development board that has the right to hire the staff. It is not the CEOs or a CEO board. And so while many of you are trying to get this done by September 1st at the same time that you're trying to seat the board, it very much becomes a chicken and an egg kind of conversation of, doing these things in chronological order and not necessarily being the best way to go about all this. So I want you to know that we understand that you as CEOs who are doing a lot of the heavy lifting right now are in the talks to get this done, and we're okay with that. But I also want you to be very clear that if you are putting contracts in place for staff to the board directly with the CEOs, that's technically not allowable by law. I would recommend that you do that on a short-term basis until you do have a local board in place who can then do the hiring of their own staff for, on behalf of the local area. So we have to be careful when we talk about that because, like I said, the law is very prescriptive in who has the right to have staff. Now, can that staff to the board, the local workforce development board, assist you as CEOs if the local board so chooses? Absolutely. But that is who is hiring staff. Okay. So I think that all the processes that you all are working through right now are fine, and you should continue on that path to get those people in place. But we just have to remember that it is the local board staff that you're working to hire. So are there any questions about that?
Y'all are quiet today.
I know, it's very quiet. It's because it's so hot here, Lori. There's just not a lot of capacity beyond the heat.
All right.
Well, that was everything that I had on the agenda. Is there anything that anybody specifically needed to ask or wanted to discuss today with myself, Lori, or even just amongst your peers?
This is Barry Anderson up in Clay County, and I guess just a question to your statement there on board staff. So we had hired board staff to help us get some of this paperwork done and move ahead and get that in place. But just so I'm clear, so moving forward from this point, the LWDB board could decide to keep the current board staff on that we have, or they could decide to hire their own staff if they so felt. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think they could keep the person on that you've already been working with, or they could hire somebody new. I think the point is, once the board is in place and is compliant, the person that you have, I guess, to your specific example, Barry, if the local board chose not to keep that person on, you as CEOs could not use WIOA funds to keep that person on in your employment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that clears. Yeah.
Yep.
Thank
you. So John, you said if the staff has already been hired and contracted by the CEO, should we get later approval from the local board? Yes, I would recommend that as soon as your local board is in place and is certified and compliant, that you ensure the local board is okay with that contract and signs on to that contract as well.
Hey, Michelle, this is Kyle Stecker. In the draft Title I Adult DW Service Provider contract, it's a contract between the fiscal agent and service provider. Is there a separate one for youth, or is that supposed to be rolled into one?
There is. I'm sorry, and actually, Western Iowa brought that up to me as well. In that draft, I think I was pretty clear in the email, but it came from Mississippi Valley, so thank you, Mississippi Valley, for sharing that. And I had forgotten that when they did it, they had a separate RFP for adult DW and youth. So the contract, they have language for just the adult DW provider. So I'm working on adding language for the youth piece, and I will get that to you. That's on my list of things to do this weekend. So
is there a big difference for the youth, or do we just include that in there?
The contract language itself, the legal jargon isn't going to change. What would change would be adding some language to the scope of work type stuff, because there is a little bit of differences under WIOA in the service provision under adult and DW and youth. So that's where the distinction comes in. Just the requirements in the law for how to work under those programs that are different. So you want to make sure that there is language specific to the youth program in the contract, and that's the part that I'll add. It's more of the scope of work type of stuff.
Okay, and then also I noticed in there the time frame for it was a year contract. For our situation, should we just have that 6-month appointment that we have in the process?
Yep, for you guys, because you have temporarily appointed a contract for 6 months, you would issue this contract for just till 12/31, and then once you've gone through the RFP, you would redo the contract. Yep.
Okay, sounds
good. Be the exact same contract again. It would just be, we would want that distinction to be between The contract that was just the temporary appointment, which by the way, as we all know, isn't even technically allowable for youth, but we're going with it because of our transition. And then once the true process of doing RFP the way the law requires has been completed. So.
Michelle, this is Heather again. I missed the information you provided to the Title I directors this morning, but I think it might be beneficial for the CEOs to hear. What are the areas supposed to do about the local plans and the MOUs since they've now expired?
Absolutely. And so this, Heather, it's a good question. And I'm assuming many of the CEOs on the call are saying instantly, what is this? What is a local plan? And what is the MOU for, right? And those are parts of the process that we haven't necessarily talked about because we've been worrying about getting these just governance structural pieces in place. And so a lot of that, so let me back up for all of you just to give a little bit of history. So under WIOA, the state is required every 4 years to submit what's called a state plan. And what it is, it's a plan between the core partner agencies, which is Title I, Title II Adult Education and Literacy, Title III Wagner-Peiser, which IWD also has, and then Title IV Vocational Rehabilitation. So those four core partner programs have to issue a state plan together. Technically, it's the governor and the state board that are issuing the state plan, really authoring the state plan to say how the WIOA funds are going to be used within the state. So that process happens every 4 years, and we are actually PY20, which began July 1st through 2024, was a new 4-year state planning cycle. So you all might remember even back in December, we published the draft state plan, and for the month of January, it was out for public comment, and then the state board was voting and approving and all that. So that work has been going on for months. And the state plan has been approved, by the way, yay. And so that will be getting published here within a couple of, well, hopefully soon. We're waiting for an answer from DOL about how to, anyway. So that requirement at the state level is also brought down to the local level by WIOA, okay? So each local area has a requirement to write a local plan that says how you at the local level are going to use your funding to, serve the citizens of your area. So the local level planning cycle follows the same cycle as a state plan. So technically, there were new local plans that were due July 1st. Now, in many of your local areas, especially the new ones, we don't have the pieces in place to do that appropriately. So we haven't been focusing on that or even really brought it up because we have other things to worry about to this point, right? So that is policy that has to be issued jointly by all those core program partners, not just Iowa Workforce Development for Title I. So what we told the Title I directors this morning is that the core partner agencies are working together to issue some guidance about what to do sort of in the meantime. And I can give you an idea of what our thought process is. So in order for you all to, before I go into the upcoming details, let me just say that what we are saying is that the existing local service plans will sort of be in effect until we can get new plans written and established. And in local areas where you've combined multiple previous regions into one local area, that will be a little bit trickier, but I'm gonna write that down and I will get some information out to you about how to do that. But in going forward, let me just talk through the process. So in order for you to write a local plan, there has to be policy that you know what to write it to. And then typically what has happened in the past is there's been a template for here are the sections that you have to answer and here are the policies you have to develop in your local area. So the next chance to put those policies written jointly by all the core programs in front of the State Workforce Development Board for approval would be at the October 23rd State Board meeting. So the core partners have dedicated themselves to making sure that policy is drafted and ready for approval by the state board at that October 23rd meeting. So let's say that the policy gets approved that day, then it would become effective and you all as local area partners mostly the local board, right? Because this is not a responsibility that the CEOs have. It is the local board's responsibility to author a plan. And so again, haven't talked about it a lot because you're not the local board. But we know that there would be a chunk of time that needs to happen in order for that draft to be written and be able to be published. So let's say that happens and we can make the policy effective November 1st. I'm thinking that we could say the existing local plans could be in utilization through maybe March 31st of 2021, which would give you all about 5 months to be able to go through that local planning process. And if we need to push that back a little bit, maybe we can. This is just me, my initial thoughts. So I would say, and Lori, I haven't seen the local board training yet, but I'm assuming as part of the roles and responsibilities, we would discuss the local plans and what that looks like. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am. It's all in there. That and the MOUs as well.
Yes. So, and the local board, is it their sole responsibility to write the local plan, or do the CEOs have a part to play in that?
The CEOs give input,
Give input, right?
but it is the responsibility of the local workforce board to do it. So, yeah.
So yeah, you all, again, in your oversight role for the local area and be in conjunction with the local board, you know, setting that strategic vision, that's what you will detail out within that local plan. So I promise we will get you some more clear instructions on what that looks like in the coming months. And Heather, was there another part to that? I'm sorry. Local plan. Oh, MOUs. I remember.
You got it.
So there's also required as part of WIOA that the local area, all of the partners within the local workforce system enter into a memorandum of understanding, which includes an infrastructure funding agreement, which is how you will pay for the local workforce system within your local area. Again, haven't brought that up too much because it's a heavy lift and we had some other key things to get into place before we could tackle that. MOUs are supposed to be rewritten, I believe, once every 3 years. Lori, did I make that up?
Nope, you got it right.
Thank you. Okay. And technically, the MOUs that Iowa has right now were supposed to be rewritten last July 1st. We worked with the Department of Labor to get an extension on those through this July 1st. And we are now obviously not as far along in the plan as we thought we would be a year ago. So we need to reach out and talk to the Department of Labor again. I will tell you, Heather, and anybody who's aware of the existing MOUs, we could extend those all we want, but the reality is that they're not compliant anyway. They don't contain all of the necessary elements of a WIOA compliant MOU, specifically the infrastructure funding agreement piece. So, you know, whether we extend them or not, it doesn't necessarily matter. I think it's a good faith effort for everyone to extend the MOU and for the partners to all sign on and say they're continuing to participate and support the workforce system. But it, you know, that doesn't really mean anything because it's not compliant anyways. But I'm going to follow up with the Department of Labor and we'll get something out about those MOUs as well.
Michelle, this is Miranda.
Yeah.
I don't mean to muddy the waters or make anything more complicated, but are we going to be required to also write a regional plan?
That's a great question, Miranda. And I will tell you that the answer is no, which is, well, okay.
Good.
So, you know, and Lori, please jump in and correct me if I say anything wrong, but I don't know if you all noticed, but I try very hard to correct myself when I refer to somebody as a region. And I very much try hard to say you are a local area. And there's a reason for that, because under WIOA, there is a distinction between a region and a local area. And what you all are 9 local workforce development areas. A local workforce development area has a local workforce development board. You know, you receive the funding, you facilitate that funding and all of those things. Under WIOA, there is also a section for regions. And a region constitutes one or multiple local workforce development areas working together as a local workforce development region. Okay, so to do that, we might have to take, you know, Mississippi Valley and South Central Iowa and East Central Iowa local workforce development areas and say, you all have very similar economies and, you know, labor forces. And so you're going to be a local workforce development region under WIOA. And therefore, not only does you each, three of you individually have to do a local plan and have your local boards on your own, but you also have to get together and work as a regional board and have a regional plan, right? It's another layer of work and effort, to be quite honest. And so right now, we are very much defining you as what you are, a local workforce development area, and would assume that in Iowa, because of the differences between urban and rural and all the things that we have going on, that our local workforce development areas individually equate to a local workforce development region, and therefore you do not have to do regional planning as well. Now, I have to add a caveat to that and say that it's not just up to Title I to decide that. It is a core partner decision across all of the WIOA titles what regions look like. Because realistically, and Lori, you might be able to speak to this about Kentucky, under WIOA, a local workforce development region does not have to be contained within a state. So for example, Burlington is a very good example in the fact that your economy very much goes into Illinois and Missouri, right? And so you might become part of a local workforce development region that is interstate. We're not there yet, and I don't plan on us getting there anytime soon. We have enough work to do at the local workforce development area level, right? But that is the way that it works under the law. Lori, do you need to add anything to that or correct anything?
I do not need to correct a thing. You got it all right.
Yay! These are bi-weekly tests for me and my WIOA knowledge, but I just have to spout it out like this. Does that answer your question, Miranda?
Yes, and that's great news.
Yeah, isn't it? All right. Any other questions? Doesn't seem like it. Well, that's okay because I do have another meeting coming up. So let me just end by saying thank you again for joining. I hope the new meeting invitation wasn't too confusing, but I have extended these bi-weekly calls out through the end of October at this point. We can end them sooner if we need to. We can continue them beyond that if we need to, whatever works for you all. And as we continue to add partners to this with local areas, adding fiscal agents and local workforce development board chairs and things like that, we can expand our group if that would make sense for you all, along with staff to the board. Anything that makes sense for you all, we are willing to do and want to do to help you. So I know that this has been a little bit of a strange couple of weeks. We've passed this magical July 1st date, and we're now officially 9 local workforce areas in Iowa. I know that there are some pieces still hanging out there for different places. For example, the master agreements and contracts for the new local areas. Western, Wayne, I know that yours is going through the attorney approval today at our level. It's just an internal approval process things go through here. So I'm hoping by the end of the day, I will be able to get that emailed out to you all. And as soon as we get the notice of award for funding for adult dislocated worker funds, we will get that moving. The addition of youth funding to all of the contracts is with our contracting folks right now as well. So this information should all be coming, I'm hoping next week, and we can continue to push forward on everything we're doing. So thank you all for your time again, and I think you all know how to contact me if you have any additional questions. So have a great weekend.